Good evening, everybody. Hell's Unicorn here, back from yet another long hiatus. I'm not going to get into the details of why I've not been active on here as a content poster, but suffice to say I've been spending a lot more time posting through the text medium and trying to get the handle of this whole Google Plus business, of which I am still not very enthusiastic. So anyway, it's campaign season again, everybody, and that means the return of all the carnage that goes with it. So I think I'm going to kick off this campaign season by making an endorsement, and I don't think a single person that's been following me is going to be surprised by who I'm endorsing. He's the guy featured in the picture. Some might even accuse me of engaging in a covenant with the Paul family of sorts, and there's probably something to that. But suffice to say, when it comes to who I think is the best person for this country, who has the best views and has the best ideological tendencies, this is my go-to person. Not as brazen as his father, not as pure as his father, that is a given. But I would argue at the end of the day, a better politician than his father, particularly a better politician than his father has been in recent years. Kind of pains me to say that because I was and will continue to be a very enthusiastic supporter of Ron Paul, a person who I believe is the only person who has run for president in recent history who is not only a decent man but also a decent human being. But the world of American politics is the world of cheats and liars, and the only way that a person can make it anywhere is by looking like one, even and especially if they are not one. In the coming weeks, I'll try to make a regular thing of putting out video content because there's already a barrage of negative media attention, which was to be expected. And I'm going to try to be a little less scatterbrained about it. I'm basically doing this full stream of consciousness, which is mostly how I've tended to do my videos in the past. The crux of everything else that I'm going to say here is going to basically just get into my thoughts regarding the small but noticeable division amongst former Paul supporters, and it culminates in the recent closing of the Dailypaul, which was one of the two pro-Ron Paul websites that I was very active in during the first campaign cycle from 2007 to the first half of 2008 in particular. I was very active on both sites, although I was more of a lurker on the Dailypaul. I didn't become a regular poster there of actual commentary until a bit later. The way I can basically break this down is as such. Ron Paul forums and the Dailypaul are two very differently geared websites, and this is the primary reason why Ron Paul Forums is continuing and the Dailypaul has basically been jettisoned and replaced with a different website called Popular Liberty, a website that I am probably not going to be frequenting. Ron Paul Forums is a political campaign forum with side forums dealing with abstract ideological concepts. The Dailypaul was more involved in ideology, and thus it was a ideologically bent forum with side forums in matters of politics, particularly practical politics. As such, while there was a good deal of overlap in the membership between the two sites, the Dailypaul contained a bit more of the pro-Ron Paul but anti-Rand Paul crowd, which I argue are people that are more interested in being right and less so in doing right. And allow me to explain what I mean by that. American politics is not won by philosophers. It's influenced by philosophers, and the best politicians are the ones who read philosophers. And that's what I argue Ron Paul was. Rand Paul is not a philosopher, he's a politician. People that only deal in abstract concepts tend not to work well with people that have a synergistic approach to politics. And me, myself, I have always had a very synergistic view of libertarianism. In fact, I've been referred to by some people that I associate with as being semi-libertarian or being a paleo-conservative libertarian, which is actually a very good description of what I believe in. As such, people that hold to an abstract form of libertarianism tend to either not show up to vote because they have moral reservations about the entire system as constituted, which I also have, but I take a very different approach to coping with this. Or when they do participate, they view voting only through the lens of making a statement and not through affecting the current process. I myself have tended towards that in the past, particularly in the 2012 election. I elected to support Gary Johnson rather than vote for the Republican Mitt Romney, and I did this for two reasons. Number one, I did not believe that Mitt Romney was going to be any better than Barack Obama whatsoever. And truth be told, apart from a couple of particular issues such as immigration and maybe some of the peripheral stuff in economics, I feel vindicated in that viewpoint. Having said that, of the current prospective field that is considering the presidency on the Republican side, with maybe the exception of Jeb Bush, and probably Lindsey Graham also, he's part of the McCain War Boys crowd, none of the people running are going to be nearly as bad as Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is going to be worse than Barack Obama, if you can believe that, particularly on foreign policy. On economics, they're both three sheets to the wind insane. They both have very creative ideas of how to control people's lives, and they're creatively insane. I'll just put it that way. But when I look at people like, say, for example, Ted Cruz, to a lesser extent, the current governor of Wisconsin, Scott Walker, and some of the other sort of moderate conservative types that are not quite in the neocon camp, I could see myself potentially voting for them in a general election, although my primary vote was already cast the minute that Rand Paul announced on April 7th. In keeping with this, Ron Paul Forums has become a hub of activity, particularly grassroots campaign activity, and I consider it much more advantageous to be hands-on this election than to go the abstract ideological route. I've had my fill of abstract ideology and abstract philosophy. I could write a book about it and maybe I could make some money on it, but I've got way too many other things that I'm interested in at present. That's part of what's been eating up my time and why I haven't been putting up videos. So, to sum up, I am probably not going to have a lot to do with the more hardline libertarian bloggers on YouTube as far as electoral politics goes this time around. It might cost me some of my audience, but I'm really going to be going in full-fledged Rand Paul for president, and most of my political video content is going to reflect that. I'm going to be engaging in a little bit of opposition research with the people attacking him, although I think for most people it's pretty obvious where this stuff goes back to, particularly in the primary. General election, I think it'll get a little more nuanced because the political left is a little bit more slippery than the fake right exemplified in the neocons. And in closing, I will just say that anybody that's interested in commenting on my videos from an angle of either stating that Rand Paul is not a pure libertarian and he's not worth my time, or stating that Rand Paul is some kind of a racist and that I have no business supporting him out of some sort of moral obligation or any other kind of left-wing slam, you're not really going to get much of a response out of me. In fact, I would probably toy with, in the case of the latter, blocking you, and in the case of the former, just ignoring you. I'm basically beyond that at this point. When things get a little more in control, then I will probably be interested in exploring some of the more abstract stuff again. But I'm basically in Murray Rothbard endorsing Pat Buchanan mode right now. So, until next time, with prudence to myself and benevolence to all of you, good evening.